Today salvation has come to this house because he too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. So this is from a reading in Luke's Gospel. And really, when you get down to it, it is the story of Jesus saving one person. So a lot of you have heard this story before. It's the story of Jesus and his encounter with Zacchaeus. And so it's a popular one in Sunday school, maybe because it involves a guy climbing a tree. But, at this point in his ministry, Jesus was being followed everywhere by crowds. So the word has gotten out, with his amazing teachings, with his works of power, his miracles. And so people are just following him everywhere he goes. And the word even gets to this guy, Zacchaeus, who, even though he was Jewish, he was another one of those traders who collected taxes on behalf of the Roman occupiers. And so he had gotten rich off of his people's misery. So Zacchaeus also happened to be short. It's one of those great details that Luke likes to include in his gospel stories. And so he couldn't see over people's heads. He couldn't see Jesus. And so he, in a rather undignified way, runs ahead of Jesus and the crowd, and he runs until he gets to a sycamore tree, and he climbs it, and then he dangles there waiting for the crowd to pass by. So imagine his shock. When Jesus gets to the tree, he stops, he looks up, and he invites himself to Zacchaeus' house and says, well, you got to come down because I'm going to your house right now. So Zacchaeus is thrilled. And the reason is, let's just be clear here, nobody was going to Zacchaeus' house. He was really essentially an exile among his own people. He was hated. He was avoided. People were probably just as likely to spit on him as speak to him. But Jesus spoke to him, and he said he was going to step inside the house of a man who had decorated it with the blood money of his own people. So it was an act of amazing grace. It was not looked for. It was certainly not deserved. But it was just the Son of God walking into Zacchaeus' living room and filling that place of emptiness and loneliness with divine presence. So first off, that's what Jesus does. Jesus shows up and he fills people's lives with his presence. So maybe that has happened to you. Maybe there's been a moment in your life when you weren't looking for God, and suddenly there God was anyway. So maybe it was in a mundane moment, like when you were washing the dishes and you're just suddenly aware of God's love and presence. Or maybe it was a really extreme moment. Maybe it was when you'd been hit by a tragedy. Maybe it was when you were afraid and you experienced these moments of courage or consolation and you knew God was with you. Maybe it was different. Maybe it came to you in a different way. Maybe you ran into financial hardship and you didn't know how you were going to get by. And then just suddenly there's that check in the mail and you knew it was the Lord looking out for you. Or maybe you were saved from danger. Some of you know that I'm a recovering alcoholic. And when I was drinking, I was a blackout drinker. And there were times that I would go from one place to another, and I wouldn't have any memory of getting there. And so in those times, I know that Jesus literally took the wheel, that he put his hands over mine when I was driving in those blackouts, and he saved me. He saved me, and he saved other people from my failure. So Jesus enters Zacchaeus' house, and when he does that, Zacchaeus' heart is redecorated. So suddenly, this greedy man has been released from the jaws of greed. And I mean, greed, that's why he was doing all this stuff in the first place, Zacchaeus. He wanted money, and he sold out his people to get it. And suddenly, his heart's totally changed. And he says, right on the spot, I give away half of my money to the poor. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine checking your bank account and writing a check for half of it? And that's it. It's gone. Well, that's what this guy does. It's what this rich man does. And he also promises to give back 4 times. If he swindled anybody, to pay it back 4 times over. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes when Jesus shows up, your life gets redecorated in a second. It's quick. It's dramatic. That's what happens with Zacchaeus. But other times it's really slow. It's this slow burn of change, of sanctification, of making someone holy. And sometimes we fight it. Sometimes God shows up and we say, I don't know if I really want that. I'm going to resist that. We do that too. Even when we resist him, even when we push back, it doesn't change what he sees, what he feels about us, what he wants to do for us. He loves us, and he won't stop. He won't stop pursuing us. Jesus says, the Son of Man, that's him, came to seek and to save the lost. So today's gospel is a reminder that Jesus comes to each person as an individual, every single person. And do you notice what he said about Zacchaeus? He said this kind of funny thing. He said, because he too is a son of Abraham. And on one level, you would say, well, yeah, like Zacchaeus had Jewish blood of Abraham's lineage. He's Jewish, But I think there's more going on there. Jesus is saying, yeah, but like no matter what family you're born into, he is claimed and loved by God. He's chosen on multiple levels, not just because he's part of the chosen people, but because God sees him and loves him. And so, that love of God, that radical gospel invitation, it spread in the history of the church, and the family of God grew. And so it grew to include both Jew and Gentile. It grew to include slave and free. It grew to include rich and poor. It grew to include the Romans, who everybody hated, those oppressors. And then it spread to the barbarians of all people, and then it spread to the English people, and then those English Christians founded this place. So it's easy to look around at St. Peter's and think this has always been a waspy place, but that is not the case. Our founding DNA is that our Dutch and Iroquois speaking priests ministered to this hodgepodge of people, to British soldiers and to Mohawk Christians and to Dutch Reformed kids running around and to people born in the colonies and in Albany. And all of these people, whether it was a soldier who came to faith as a baby in an English baptistry back home, or whether it was a Mohawk woman who came to faith by speaking to a missionary, each individual person encountered that living Christ, that divine presence who entered their lives and filled them with his love and grace. So St. Peter's used to be known as the English Church, but it was in fact a multilingual, multi-ethnic place for people to encounter Jesus. And so today, that's good news, because we look out the door, you look out the door at downtown Albany, and we see a city, first of all, full of God's beloved, every face, beloved of God. We see city workers and state workers walking around. We see people running to catch the bus right down the street in their blue jeans or in their hijabs. We see homeless people. We see people in suits. It is a multicultural, multi-ethnic city. And we have something for them. We are bearers of God's love letter to them, delivered once to a man in a sycamore tree, delivered once to us as we encountered Christ. And we can say to them, listen, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.